Welcome to today's episode of the Mindset Mentor Podcast. I am your host, Rob Dial. If you have not yet done so, hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of this podcast. I have a special guest with me back for round two. I have my wife, Lauren, who's going to be with me today, and we're going to be talking about what is love. This is it's going to be a deep conversation, and Lauren and I are going to give our perspectives, which feel right for us, but doesn't mean that it's internationally right for every single person.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it is the answer. It's just ours from where we're currently standing.
Sure. Yeah. And so Lauren, welcome to the podcast again. Nice to see you.
Thanks.
We're recording this on the same day. So we're in the same clothes for those of you guys that are watching us on YouTube.
Yeah.
We're wearing the same thing because it's the same day. But we're going to talk about love. And this is a topic that I think is really good to dive into. And I could talk about it by myself, but it makes a lot more sense if I have my wife, who I've been with for over 10 years, who has helped me get better at discovering and figuring out what love is.
I love love.
And Lauren loves love. And so we entered into the relationship with completely different experiences of life. And so let's start off with you. When you think about love, I want you to share yours. And I know that your dad used to ask you a question when you used to go to bed every single night. So if you could share that with the audience, and we could start off there.
Yeah, I think this is something so sweet and special that my dad started when I couldn't even tell you how old I was, but it was just a ritual that started every single night. Before I went to bed, he would tuck me in and he would say, "What does love mean?" Mm-hmm. And I would come up with whatever I thought love meant that day. Love means, making breakfast with your family. Love means giving, your friend a hug or whatever, came to mind for me that day. But it was really cute because every night, that was a question he would ask me. Yeah.
And so coming from that, when you first came into our relationship, what was your view on love? What did you think that it was? What is love? What was love at that point in time for you?
Yeah. I feel like I have been really fortunate to come from a childhood and a background where love was very abundant. I mean, like everybody gave and showed love very freely. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and so I had her with me at all times, and she was like my best friend growing up. I remember like in high school, we went on a girls trip and my mom was the only mom that couldn't come. And I legitimately cried at the airport saying bye to my mom. And like, I was a teenage girl, God. I was probably like 16 or 17. I loved my parents. My parents loved me. I had two little sisters and we all just, my experience I'm super grateful and very blessed with how loving of a background I was brought up in.
Mm-hmm. And so my perspective was definitely different with my dad not being around and my father being an alcoholic. And so I never felt like I wasn't loved, but I would say that, it was definitely a different perspective that we both brought into the relationship. And I want to talk about and share our perspectives now that we're in this relationship. And we had a conversation a couple months ago, and we were talking about a friend in a relationship, and you said, oh yeah, but she really loves him. Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah, but is she in love with him? Mm-hmm. And then we had this deep conversation about what's the difference between love, like loving somebody, versus being in love with somebody. And so I gave you my definition, and I don't think you gave me your definition because I think we arrived at home and then we went on to something else. Yeah. So I'll give my definition in a second, but what do you think from your perspective is the difference between loving somebody and being in love with somebody?
Yeah. So I feel like I have love for other people. I really care about them. They mean a lot to me. I will genuinely love a lot of my friends, pretty quickly. Like I just appreciate and have gratitude for these people and I love them. Mm-hmm. To me, being in love is a little bit different because, and again, I think this is like where I stand right now because this is always evolving and changing. But as I was thinking about it, to me, it's somebody that you can be completely vulnerable with and feel safe to be your full self around. You don't have to edit yourself in any way. And you want to have every experience of life with this person. what I mean by that is like, there's friends that I really like to go to, you know, to travel with, or there's friends that I like to do podcasts with, or there's friends that I want to just go shopping with, right? Like there's different people for different things. And I love them. But then there's also times where like, I don't necessarily want to be around that person, not because there's anything wrong with them, but there's just, you know, there's something there that like, maybe I don't feel safe opening up to them about certain things or maybe doing certain things. But when you're in love with somebody, I feel like you're in such a state of being your true self that you want more from your experience with them, and you want to experience everything with them, not only just like being together and showing them love, but like passion, and even whether it's like intimately or sexually, like you want that with them too, right? Because I don't want that with everybody. But being in love with somebody, that's such a beautiful part of the human experience, is the intimacy. And that I feel like is another added component of being in love with someone. That's something else you want to experience with them.
Yeah, I would agree with you on a lot of that. And the thing that I had said to you that has over the past couple of months kind of matured in my mind, if I've started to get deeper into it, is I think that there's definitely a lot of people that I love. But I think when you're in love with somebody, I think there's an aspect of realizing that there are parts of myself from childhood, from growing up, from other relationships and heartbreaks that has not been fully healed. And you make me feel safe enough to be able to work on those things with you. And I think that that's what I've come to realize, is that I think that, and we were in LA last week, and I was on Matthew Hussey's podcast, and he, you know, has a podcast called Love Life, and he is a dating coach and stuff. And we were talking about this, and I said, I think that one of the highest reasons for being in a relationship with somebody is I'm working on myself. I'm trying to love and accept myself even more and trying to become a more evolved version of myself. But I think that there's still some aspects of myself for most people where I can, like, when someone's working on self-love, like they can get, if they're working really hard, like 95% there. But there's still about 5% where it's like, yeah, but if they only knew how whatever I am, then maybe they won't accept me. And so a lot of people don't get fully, truly vulnerable with somebody, right? Because they think, if she only knew this about me, she wouldn't want to be with me. If he only knew this about me. So they open up almost fully, but they don't fully open up. Yeah. I think when you're like truly fully in love with somebody is when you can say, here's all of me, and I feel safe to be vulnerable. Because vulnerable, if you look at the actual root word of the word vulnerable, it's vulnerar, which means in Greek, to be injured. So like open to be injured in some sort of way. Yeah. I think it's about, like, even if you're somebody who's working hardcore on yourself, of loving yourself, to accepting yourself, you'll get like 95% there. And sometimes we need to see somebody else accept all of us and still love us for us to be able to go, yeah, maybe I can love that extra 5% of myself. Yeah. And I think that sometimes just having that person reflect love for who we are and accept us and not try to change us, that person, and it's one of the highest senses of what we can be in a relationship for, is that person can help us heal ourselves by showing us what it looks like to accept and love ourselves.
What a relief it is when you can be that vulnerable and have it met with love by somebody that you really care about. Like, that feels so good. And I think that's where the healing starts to happen, is because if, like, for me, when there's been times where I'm like, oh, this is the not cute, real part of me that, like, just hoping for the best, but like, I'm going to just go into this and be fully transparent, fully vulnerable. And you meet that with love. I really believe in everything that you have feedback on, right? Like, I value your opinion. And so when you give me feedback that's in alignment with love for something that I was judging within myself, it's like, oh my God, it gives you just like such a different perspective. And then you can feel so much relief in that. And I think that's what gets you back to that state where you are more in alignment with your true self, which I think we're all love. I think the true version of all of ourselves is so much more in alignment with love. So then it puts you into that state of being in love.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think that, I have come to realize that Hollywood has really screwed up a lot of things for a lot of people is because I think that we confuse love with lust, like sweep me off my feet and I'm head over heels and like you complete me. And I personally, this is my opinion, don't believe that any other person completes another person. I think that we have to complete ourselves.
Yeah.
And then we try to bring, so I don't see it as like, I'm 50% me and Lauren's 50% her. And together we make 100% of a great relationship. The way I see it is like, I'm 100% working on myself and trying to get to 100% of potential of Rob and healed Rob.
Yeah.
Lauren's working on herself to be 100% of healed Lauren, the best version of herself. And we both bring the best version of ourselves to the relationship, because I think a lot of times people get into relationships looking for somebody to fill a void versus just saying like, hey, I'm going to show up as the best version of myself and bring that to the relationship. It's almost like when you look at some people's attachment styles is they attach to somebody else because of the fact that they're looking for that person to complete a part of them that doesn't feel whole or feels like there's a void in some sort of way.
Yeah. And it just puts so much pressure and expectation on someone else to be something.
Right.
Relationships are already hard enough.
Yeah. And I think when you look at the phrase like in love, like I've heard people, I heard a coach that I follow say this before, and he was saying, someone asked him like, hey, how you been? And he's like, I'm in love. And they're like, oh, with who? And he's like, I'm not in love with anybody.
Yeah.
I'm in a state of love. And so what I think it is that when you're with somebody who you are in love with, is they bring out a state of you that exists inside of you that's been there forever, that might just have been dormant for a very long time. And they make you realize that you don't have to have your walls up. You don't have to feel unsafe. You don't have to feel like there's something wrong with you, but we can be in a state of love together. And anybody, I think, can bring out love for you. And you don't have to be like, I'm in love with you, but I can be in a state of love and try to bring that love to anyone that I go and I meet. But being with you and seeing you accept me and me accepting myself through you accepting me too, makes me go, you know what? What if I'm just in a state of love more? And when I go and the cashier asks me how my day's doing, I try to bring that state of love to try to impact him or her. Not so I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in love with him. But it's like, I just want to bring a state of love to them, which maybe impacts them and changes their day in some sort of way. And they can bring it to another person.
Yeah. How amazing is that?
Yeah, it's quite amazing.
That's sweet. Yeah.
I'm curious your thoughts on it. The thoughts on being vulnerable, because this is something that we've worked on together, where I had trouble with being vulnerable. You definitely had trouble with being vulnerable, but my even more trouble with being vulnerable made you have more trouble with being vulnerable. So I'm curious your thoughts on, how it's progressed for you, how it's changed through our relationship, with the aspect of just being able to be truly vulnerable with me.
It's interesting because I think, again, we talk about like coming back to like our true selves and being in love, and my natural self is much more open. And I think that because you were having a little bit of a hard time with fully opening up to the way I express love, when we first got together, I started pumping the brakes a little bit. And I started to create an idea in my mind of how you wanted me to be. And of course, I wanted to be in alignment with that. Yeah. So I started to withhold love. And that creates a lot of issues on two levels. Number one, I'm withholding love from this person that I care about, which is limiting your experience of me. And also, it's just not natural for me to be that way. And so when I realized that was happening, it was a huge shift for us in our relationship, because I could tell there was like a wall building. But at that point in time, I didn't have like a whole lot of self-awareness. I just felt like there was just something blocking us. Right. And it's like we had gotten to this like capacity, which I knew it was possible for there to be more. I knew there was more out there for us, but the level of vulnerability, it just wasn't there. Right. So once that was brought to our attention, I think that was actually... Was that through John when we went and did the therapy?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that I actually became more conscious of the fact that I was actually withholding love.
Right.
I thought that I was just being who you wanted me to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, I wasn't aware of how much I was actually holding back until that point in time.
Yeah. And I remember him saying he was like, and for those of you guys that John was a therapist that we saw together about 2.5 years into our relationship.
Yeah.
And me having less capacity at that point in time to be vulnerable and not really knowing as much about what love was or feeling it as much, you kind of met me where I was versus being in your natural state.
Right.
It was that you were actually meeting me where I was and you weren't giving more.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he had said is it's Rob, it's your job is to try to open up a little bit more in the relationship and to try to be more open, allow yourself to be more open. And Lauren, you need to teach him how to love.
That changed everything. He's like, you're actually the teacher. And I was like, oh, okay. And I had never seen it that way before. So that was a huge eye opener and a really good perspective to understand what was going on.
And how do you think that shifted things for you and then also shifted things in our relationship?
Oh, I mean, it was like huge because I started to understand, obviously my understanding of everything got so much more clear, and I took my role very seriously because I cared about you. Mm-hmm. And also I was able to, they had like a new window into why you were the way you were. It wasn't just because initially I think I probably had the perception like I'm not good enough for this.
Right.
He's withholding something from me because I'm not enough.
Right.
Was the initial story I kind of formulated from that. But then having the understanding of, okay, Rob is the way he is because of what he experienced. And it's not that he's withholding, he needs to learn. Like he just doesn't have the context or the background to be where you are with love. And I was like, oh my God, I just had never realized that. And so once I understood the assignment, I knew exactly what I needed to do. And I can't say I stepped into it like right away. It took me a little bit of time to...
It took you a while to feel safe to give me more love.
Right.
Like a while. It wasn't like a week or two. It was like slowly over years.
I had a better understanding, but then it did take me some time to really feel safe to... I guess it was like I was still a little bit afraid that it wasn't going to be reciprocated.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, that was important for me at that point.
Yeah. And that's a really important part, which is that I want everyone to kind of know is that if you're not conscious of the stories going on in your head, you're never really in a full relationship with somebody. You're in a relationship that the image of them, you're in a relationship with the image that you've built of them in your head. Yeah. And in fact, you're not even fully in a relationship with that image. You're in a relationship with the image of yourself that you've built in your head. And so that might not make any sense, and I'll give people context of exactly what I mean. So there might be something where it's like, we've all done this before. It's like, I want to say something, right? Mm-hmm. But if I say this, she's going to say this back to me. And then I'm going to say this to her. And then it's going to turn into this thing. And we basically make an entire story in our head.
Yeah.
And it's not that I am in relation with you. I'm making a image of me in my head of how I'm going to react. I'm making an image of you of how you're going to react. And I'm making a whole story of how those two images are going to react versus actually just coming to you and being a certain way. And so you were thinking probably, and you can let me know if I'm incorrect, is like, okay, consciously, yes, I want to open myself up and I want to show Rob more love. I want to be more vulnerable with him. But if I do, well, he's probably not going to fully open up back to me. And if he doesn't fully open back to me, then I'm going to be the one that's going to get hurt. And if I'm the one that's going to get hurt, then I'm going to act this way and I might say this thing to him. And so literally, in reality, might be sitting there like, hey, I'm over here. And I might just be hanging out, working, doing whatever it is. But there's a whole story that's going on in your head that's actually getting in the way of us as two humans connecting.
Yeah, it was totally me going into protection mode because I wasn't allowing myself to be just, my true self, which is so much more loving.
I think another key part of that that's really important too is, I've heard people say, and we've talked about it many times, like, I'm into working on myself. I'm into personal development, and this person I'm in a relationship with is not. Yeah. And one of the things I think I've come to terms with the most as of recently is someone doesn't have to have the same interests as you, but what the most important aspect is that they are putting in the effort to, if there is a problem, they're putting in actual effort to try to overcome that problem together with you. And I think that that's one thing that shifted a lot for our relationship, is that whenever there was something that came up, I think we've both brought it up to each other. We've gotten better at communicating, of course.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, as we both started working on each other, like we started working on ourselves.
Yeah.
I feel like the relationship got a whole lot easier because we realized that it's almost never the other person's fault. It's usually our reaction to that person that ends up being their fault.
Yeah, it's highlighting something within you. Yeah, I think everything shifted once I started working on myself more, because you'd been working on yourself for some time before I really started to dive deeper into my own growth. And it does change everything for the relationship, because you can only really love someone to the extent that you're loving yourself.
Yeah, sure. And I think that one of the things that's important too, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, is when we're talking about building the image of somebody in your head and what's going to happen and the whole thing. One of the things that I found with you that really shifted was you started working yourself to get out of your head so much and more into your heart. So you started actually like being like, well, I want to get into my heart. I want to get into my body. I want to start to feel things. And you years ago 3-4 years ago, used to say like, you never told me how mean you were to yourself in your head. And then became real. You're like, I'm going to tell you. And you started telling me, I was like, damn, you suck in your head to yourself. Like you were just such an asshole. And then you started going on this journey of like self-love.
Yep.
And you started working on yourself. And I actually, now that we're speaking about it, I don't know, we've never actually spoken this. I think our relationship became better as you actually started working on loving yourself more.
Right.
What did that journey look like for you, for people who are out there that are struggling with self-love, or they are too negative to themselves in their heads?
Yeah. Well, I think what ended up kicking all of that off was one day you asked me, you were like, are you happy? And I was like, no. And it wasn't because of anything that was going on around me or within our relationship. It had everything to do with my self-talk. And then I finally decided to say out loud all of the things that I was saying to myself in my head. And it started the moment I woke up. And I would just start my routine of just shit talking to myself. And yeah, of course I was not happy because the things I was saying were horrible. And so once
what would you say to yourself?
Oh, I'd be like, okay, well, here you are not getting up again on time because you're just so lazy and you have nothing to get up for anyway. So like, you don't have any purpose. And of course you don't have any purpose because you're stupid. Right. And so it was like just this endless thing like, oh, well, of course you're running late because you can't get your shit together enough. And, oh, look at you. Are you breaking out again? Because you're ugly and you're gross. Like, I mean, I was horrible to myself. It was like every single thing that I would say. And at that time, I was physically manifesting all kinds of crazy stuff, right? Like I was breaking out so bad. So it's like everything that I was feeling on the inside was coming out on the outside
and stuff.
Yeah, I had eczema. I had for me, it showed up with a bunch of different skin issues and I was really struggling. And the more I started to like physically manifest all of these skin issues, of course, like the more gross I would feel. And then it was a cycle. And so, I was doing everything skincare wise and I became obsessed. And then one common thread whenever I was reading and trying to figure out what to do for my skin was always like remove stress, anxiety, and you need to just care for yourself, self-care. And then that's like a combination of that. And then you also asking me if I was happy. I was like, what's the emotional side of everything that I haven't tackled? Like I'm just being such an asshole to myself. And so saying out loud what I was saying to myself in my head really made me more conscious of everything. And I was like, this is disgusting because I would never say those things to anybody else. So why the hell was I saying it to myself?
Yeah.
And then from there, I just was really consciously shifting the things that I would say. And
what did that look like? So like for someone else who's like not good with self-love, like what was the practice like when you would notice that pop up? Did you have something that you would do or go back to? I would
have to switch it. Whatever I said if I said something mean, I would have to say something nice. And I also worked really hard at reprogramming. So I got mala beads and I would just Google like, what is a self-love mantra? And I sat there with my mala beads. And if I even for one bead felt like I became unconscious and was just going through the motions, I would go back and re-say that mantra and be very present with every single bead, so that every day I was reprogramming what I was saying to myself. And that was my ritual in the morning every single day. And then what ended up happening is I remember one day I was making the bed, and I randomly said something all I said to myself out of nowhere was, "Lauren, you're so awesome." And I was like, holy shit, like this is not something old Lauren would have said. And I didn't have like a real good reason for like feeling like I was super awesome. I mean, I was literally just making the bed, but it was then that I knew I had finally created a change in myself, because I said something nice for no reason.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think it's, that's a big piece of like getting out of your head and getting into your heart, because I don't think your true self, there's like our true self, which is who we come into this world as. And there's our conditioned self, which is who we've built ourselves into being based off of all the programmings and patterns and what our parents want us to be and what society wants us to be and what bullies say to us. And we reprogram ourselves, and we accidentally program ourselves. And basically what it comes down to is you were in your head so much, you're like, I'm going to get into my heart. And your heart, if you ever get into your heart, your heart's not an asshole. Right?
No,
your head's the asshole, right?
Oh, for sure.
Or it can be the asshole depending on who you are and how you were raised. And you kind of got a little bit more into your heart. And I think that actually shifted a lot of stuff for you, because I think that now that we're talking about it, I think that a lot of times, like, because of the fact that you were so mean to yourself, there wasn't like an underlying agitation that was always there.
Oh, for sure.
And that would kind of show up in our relationship, where it would be like, you'd be very short fused and you'd want to blow up about something. Or you would make a story about something. And so actually, I think that it actually shifted a lot in our relationship when you started shifting your internal story within yourself.
Right.
And I think that it comes back to when we talk about love and we talk about acceptance, is what I have found with most people is that what we're usually searching for in the external world is actually what we're searching for in ourselves. And so if someone's sitting out there like, well, I want someone to love me, or I want my husband to accept me, or I want my girlfriend to accept me more. Sure, that's a piece of it. But there's also a difference of going, okay, what do I want from them? I want them to accept me more. Do I accept myself? Yeah, I accept myself. Okay, do I accept all aspects of myself? Oh, shit, maybe I don't. Do I love myself? Oh, fuck, I don't know if I do. I think I do. Maybe I do. And so it's really about going, okay, if I can actually learn to love and accept myself more for all aspects of who I am, the good sides of me and the quote unquote bad sides of me, and I can go, I'm just going to love and accept all of it. You don't even have to love all of it. Just accept all of it. Because what I believe is that we have built ourselves into being who we think we need to be in order to survive, in order to fit in order to be what we're supposed to be in society, whatever it might be. And in turn, what we do is we build ourselves into a kind of a different person than we truly are. Right. And I think that the problem with self-love is that, and the reason why it's so hard is because our true self doesn't accept our conditioned self. And if you can't accept them to something, you can't truly love it. And I think that the true state of a human is love.
Oh, yeah.
But we get in our own way because there's aspects of ourselves that we don't like and we don't accept. And so I think what's really important is if we truly do want to love somebody, then we truly actually need to figure out a way to love ourselves, because we can't give anything that we don't have.
Yeah. And I think it's also a process of just getting out of your head and into your heart with practices. I mean, a huge thing that helped me even with like anxiety and everything, just dealing, was getting out of my head through heart math, which is just basically a combination of breathing and focus and connecting with your body and how you feel. And when you can do that, you're connecting with what's real instead of these thoughts and stories that have accumulated over time.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're in your head, you're almost never here, like physically here.
Like not present. Right.
You're not present. You're in the future, you're in the past, you're in a story that you've made up. But the only thing that's actually physically here in this present moment is your body. And so if you ever want to come back and be present, you can always go back to the body. Another aspect that I think is important as far as love goes is I think that many people love their significant other the way that they were loved by their parents. Yeah. And that's all good and dandy, except for I have found from coaching thousands of people that most people are unconsciously trained by their parents to be what the parent wants them to be, by retracting love when they don't act the way that they want them to act. And so I think what happens with a lot of people is they get into a relationship with somebody and they want that person to be different. And they want to change that person into what they want them to be, versus saying, I accept you as you are, whatever it is that you want to be. And once again, we're not perfect in any sort of way at all. But I think one thing that we have done really well in our relationship with is we've never actually really tried to change each other.
Yeah. No. And I think that that's also like kind of to what we're saying. It's a product of us not looking for what we need internally from each other, because we're both conscious that we need to provide that to ourselves. And so I don't need to make you anything but what you are, because I'm already giving myself everything that I need. Yeah. Right. Like that's what we're working towards anyway.
Right. Yeah. And like when I first started the podcast, I had the idea for the podcast in 2015. And I told you in Jason's Deli, like I remember the exact moment.
Me too.
You wouldn't be like, you were like, okay, cool. And podcasts were like nothing back then. Like there were some podcasts, but it wasn't like it is now. Like they weren't all over the place like they are.
Right.
And I was like, I'm gonna start a podcast. And you're like, cool. But I've been in relationships before where I've been like, hey, I'm gonna start a podcast. And they'd be like, why? That's dumb. That's a waste of your time. That's a waste. You're not gonna make any money. Like, and people immediately go to bashing that thing. And I think that's one thing that we've done really well. You have an interest for painting. So I've been like, you know what? I'm gonna buy her painting supplies and try to help her get better at painting. And so I think that's one really big piece of being in love with somebody, is seeing them as they are.
Right.
As a human who, if they're an adult, they're really just a child that isn't fully healed from childhood and from traumas.
Yeah.
And saying they're just a child that's wounded, that needs some help, that needs some love, that needs some acceptance in an adult's body. And they have interests and they have things they want to do. And I'm going to try my best to accept them as they are and try to help them with whatever it is that needs to be healed by just holding them in a space of acceptance no matter what.
Right. Something that somebody said once that really helped me with this is to fully understand that everybody's doing the best with what they have, or doing the best they can. Yeah. So I think that that's also important, because we can have really big expectations for what we think somebody should be doing, but that's of course from your perspective. Yeah. And you're coming from a completely different background, set of experiences than someone else. And so to expect that from somebody else it's not fair. Yeah. And if you can truly lean into the loving side of yourself, you will believe that everybody is doing the best that they can. Why would anybody want to do anything less?
Yeah. And also, why would you want to judge people too?
Yeah. And who are you to judge at the same time?
Exactly. Yeah. Like none of us are perfect. Like, and the thing that I always try to do, and if you guys want to try to not judge people as much, because it's something I've worked on with myself, I know you've worked on as well. Yeah. I want to love and accept people more, is go back to the fact that, once again, Lauren just said, is everybody is doing the best with what they have. Even if it doesn't seem like they are, if they could do better, they would be doing better. Yeah. And I think one of the important things to realize is going back to the whole thing of like, I do, having worked with so many people over this time, try to look at everybody as just a child in a grown-up's body, and
that's
realize
what they are.
Yeah. I realized like what happened. Like we were driving the other day and we were in LA, and I saw a homeless lady that was, definitely on drugs and, leaned over and I was like, man, she was 40 years old, 30 years old. I don't know how old she was. And I was like, man, what happened to that little girl? And if you can start to see people in that way, versus not the adult that's in front of you, when you see a very aggressive guy that's like an asshole, what you're seeing is a kid who's really scared and something happened that made him he's just a little boy that's wounded and hasn't grown out of it. And he hasn't been accepted. He hasn't been able to figure out, he hasn't seen acceptance from other people. He hasn't seen acceptance to figure out how to accept himself and how to start loving himself. Yeah. And I think if people just want to develop a deeper relationship with everyone around them, but also specifically someone that they're in a relationship with, it's like, hey, yeah, this is a little girl, a little boy that's still just trying their best, because nobody in this world has it figured out. Everyone is just bumping into walls in the dark trying to figure out what the hell they're supposed to do in this life. And the more that you can start to see people from that perspective, I think it makes it a whole lot easier to accept people. And when you can accept people, you can love people.
Right. Well, because your perception is your reality. And when your perception is shaped from a completely different set of experiences, then you can start to understand why someone else's perception is everybody's going to have a wildly different one.
Yeah.
And that allows for more empathy
Mm-hmm.
for people, because you don't have to understand why someone's acting the way that they are, but you can be understanding and hold compassion for them, knowing that you truly just don't know what they're going through.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay. You don't have to.
Sure. You don't have to know everything that's going on. So then let's wrap it up with this. Let me ask you the question that we started off with in the title of this episode. Give me a short answer. What is love?
Oh, what is love? I feel like love is when you can get down to the true version of yourself and show kindness and compassion and care for someone else and yourself.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with you. I would say love is the state that is natural for all of us when we can get past the judgment of ourselves and the judgment of others.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
I like that. That's a good one.
All right, everybody. That's what we got for you for today. If you love this episode, please do me a favor. Share it on your Instagram stories. Tag me in it, Rob Dial Jr., ROBDIALJR. You can tag Lauren in it too. She is on Instagram. It is Lauren Pena Dial. And if you guys want us to keep doing episodes like this, if you have any questions that you want us to answer, whether that be with relationships, love, life, dogs, spiritual development, any of those things. Lauren is also a coach and has been a coach now for 4 years, and has her own clients and all of that as well. You can go to askrobandlauren.com and you can just put your questions there. And hopefully we can do more of these. And I just want to give you guys a different perspective. Instead of just me being the guy who's teaching directly to you all the time, I want to see if I can, give you some other perspectives and kind of see behind the scenes of what's going on in my mind, what's going on in my life, what's going on in my relationships. And once again, it's askrobandlauren.com. And I'll just say this: the more detailed your question, the more thorough your question, the more thorough our answers can be. Mm-hmm. So if you can give us some more context, that would help, whatever it might be. So that's what we got for you for today. I'm going to leave you the same way I leave you every single episode. Make it your mission, make somebody else's day better. We appreciate you.
I appreciate you.
We hope that you have an amazing day.
Yeah.